The shopping mall was bustling with life, bright lights illuminating every corner, the hum of conversations echoing through the corridors, and the sound of shoes tapping against the polished floors. It was a typical evening, yet something felt different today. People moved with a purpose, but there was an undercurrent of anticipation that hung in the air. Among the crowd, a tall figure walked through the entrance, a man known by many but seen by few without his signature presence. Elon Musk. His presence alone sparked whispers and murmurs. People stared, phones were raised, and a quiet energy surged through the crowd. His calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the chaos around him. At the information desk, the mall manager stood, observing the scene unfold with a strained expression. The mall's security team subtly positioned themselves, ensuring that nothing went unnoticed. But even with the measures, the tension was palpable. As Elon moved toward the central atrium, the crowd parted respectfully, making way for his purposeful strides. His eyes scanned the surroundings, a subtle intensity behind them, as if each moment mattered more than the last. Little did anyone know, this ordinary evening was about to become anything but. The mall buzzed with excitement as people followed Elon Musk's every move. His calm yet commanding presence had a way of silencing the crowd without needing a single word. The mall manager, still observing from a distance, felt his stomach twist in unease. He knew this visit wasn't just about shopping, it was something more. As Elon walked through the main corridor, his gaze locked onto the young man standing near the entrance, a figure clad in a MAGA hat. The sight was unexpected, a stark contrast to the diversity of shoppers around him. The young man's stance was bold, his expression defiant. Elon's steps slowed, his eyes meeting the young man's without hesitation. There was a depth in his gaze, a quiet understanding. "This isn't just about politics," Elon said softly, his voice carrying a weight of thoughtfulness. "It's about identity, belief, and freedom to express what you stand for." The young man held his ground, his voice steady. "It's not about a slogan or a hat. It's about who we are and the values we choose to represent," he replied, his tone filled with conviction. The crowd around them grew more attentive, sensing the seriousness of the moment. The mall manager clenched his fists slightly, unable to ignore the intensity building between them. He knew this wasn't just a conversation. It was a moment of change unfolding before his eyes. The mall manager shifted uncomfortably, his eyes flickering between Elon Musk and the young man. The crowd around them was silent, watching the intense exchange unfold. His role had always been about maintaining order, but today's situation was testing every ounce of his resolve. Elon's calm voice broke the silence again. "You're entitled to your beliefs," he said, addressing both the young man and the crowd. "But we have to ask ourselves, are we truly listening to each other? Or are we just speaking to be heard?" The manager's fingers tapped lightly on the counter, his mind racing. His duty was to ensure that the mall ran smoothly, but seeing the emotion pouring out from both sides left him torn. "This mall is meant to be a space for everyone," he finally said, his voice wavering. "But sometimes, disagreement leads to chaos." Elon stepped closer, his voice lower but more impactful. "Disagreement should lead to understanding, not division. It's not about silencing voices. It's about making space for all perspectives." His words hung in the air, creating an atmosphere of introspection. The young man nodded, his expression softer. "That's all we ask for, respect and space to exist." The crowd murmured in agreement, a shift evident in their energy. The manager, though still guarded, felt a sense of responsibility to guide the situation, not control it. This wasn't a simple disagreement anymore. It was a moment of potential change. The young man's gaze met Elon's once again, steady and resolute. "This hat represents more than just a political stance," he said firmly. "It's about standing for what I believe in, even when others try to shut it down." The weight of his words hung in the air, drawing the attention of the surrounding crowd. Elon took a deep breath, his voice calm yet powerful. "And that belief is important," he acknowledged. "But what happens when beliefs clash? Do we dig in our heels and refuse to listen, or do we find common ground?" The young man's expression softened slightly. "We have to learn to navigate differences without fear," he said quietly. "Otherwise, we're destined to remain divided." The mall manager stepped forward, his voice tentative. "But what if that difference creates discomfort?" he asked. "How do we balance freedom with respect for all?" Elon gave a small, knowing smile. "Discomfort is necessary for growth. It's not about erasing beliefs. It's about fostering understanding." His words resonated deeply with the young man and the crowd. They began to see that the conversation was not about politics alone, but about the humanity that connected them all. The room grew quieter, every word weighing heavily on their collective thoughts. In this moment, it was no longer a battle of opinions. It was the beginning of a conversation where perspectives met and boundaries softened. Elon's words hung in the air, each one resonating with the weight of shared emotions. The young man nodded slowly, absorbing the truth in them. The crowd had grown quieter, their focus shifting entirely toward understanding rather than confrontation. The manager remained silent, observing the shift, his earlier discomfort replaced by a sense of reflection. "Maybe we've been looking at this the wrong way," he finally said, breaking the stillness. "It's not just about rules or policies. It's about creating an environment where everyone feels seen and heard." Elon smiled softly, offering a nod of approval. "Exactly. It's about creating a space where diversity is celebrated, not suppressed." His calm demeanor had the power to disarm tension, making the moment feel personal and genuine for everyone involved. The young man took a deep breath. "Respect doesn't mean agreement," he said. "It means recognizing that we all have a right to exist in a space, regardless of how we express ourselves." The crowd began to murmur again, this time with a sense of unity. The air felt lighter, no longer clouded by defensiveness or hostility. For the first time, the manager realized that the conversation wasn't just about two opposing sides. It was about creating change that went beyond mere tolerance. This wasn't just a moment. This was the start of something bigger, something transformative. Elon's words hung in the air as the crowd continued to absorb the moment. The young man looked down for a brief second, a flicker of vulnerability crossing his face. "This isn't just about a hat," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's about my father, about everything he taught me, about standing up for what you believe in, even when the world tells you you're wrong." Elon's expression softened, his gaze gentle. "Tell me about him," he encouraged. The young man hesitated for a moment, taking a deep breath before continuing. "He grew up in a time when voices like ours were silenced. He fought for freedom of expression, and he instilled that in me." The crowd listened intently, their earlier judgment replaced by understanding. The manager's brow furrowed as he absorbed the young man's story, memories stirring in his own mind of past disagreements that had once seemed irreparable. Elon stepped forward again, his voice steady. "Your father's struggle reminds us that history is filled with moments where people fought to be heard. But it's not enough to fight. We must ensure the conversation evolves, not just the conflict." Tears welled in the young man's eyes as he nodded. "That's why we're here today, to continue his legacy, not just to be seen, but to be understood." The room was silent now, filled with a deep emotional connection, each person grappling with the weight of what they had witnessed. The mall manager stood silently, his mind racing. The young man's story had touched him deeply, stirring memories of his own struggles to balance fairness and understanding. He glanced around at the crowd, their expressions a mix of empathy and contemplation. It was no longer a simple disagreement. It was a realization that perspectives could coexist. Elon's words echoed in his mind. It's not just about tolerance. It's about creating a space where everyone can feel a sense of belonging. The manager felt the weight of responsibility, the realization dawning on him that the mall was more than just a business. It was a community. Maybe we've been too focused on rules and policies, the manager said slowly, his voice quieter this time. But rules can't capture the complexity of human emotions and experiences. What we need is understanding, not just compliance. The young man gave a gentle nod, his expression one of gratitude. It's not about compliance. It's about acceptance. About seeing us for who we really are. Elon stepped in once more, his presence calming. Acceptance doesn't mean we lose our individuality. It means we gain something greater, a deeper connection. The room felt lighter now, a shared sense of growth and unity replacing the tension. The manager's shoulders relaxed, and for the first time, he truly understood what it meant to lead with compassion. The manager's words hung in the air, and for a moment, the crowd stood in thoughtful silence. The mall had become a space for real dialogue, where emotions intertwined with understanding. Elon looked around at the faces in the crowd, each one reflecting a new perspective, a willingness to embrace change. The young man stepped forward once. Again, his voice calm but resolute. "This isn't the end," he said. "It's the beginning. We've laid the foundation for something greater, a space where we can truly hear each other." Elon nodded in agreement. Change starts with conversations like these. It starts with listening, really listening, to what others have to say, even if we don't always agree. The manager's expression was no longer weighed down by doubt. It had shifted to one of hope. "You're right," he said softly. "This is a shift we need to make. A shift towards empathy and understanding, not just policies that create barriers." The crowd began to murmur once more, but this time it was a quiet sense of affirmation. People were beginning to feel empowered by the idea of inclusivity, not just acceptance. The young man smiled, his eyes glistening with a newfound sense of purpose. "Together," he said, "we can build a space where every voice matters, where the differences that divide us become the strengths that unite us." Elon's final words echoed through the space. The future isn't defined by what separates us. It's built on what brings us together. The mall was quieter now, the energy transformed from tension to a shared sense of purpose. The manager took a deep breath, his earlier doubts replaced by clarity. "It's not just about words anymore," he said, addressing the crowd softly. "It's about action, about creating real change, not just in policies, but in how we treat one another." Elon's gaze met his, steady and supportive. "Exactly. Change is a process, but it begins when we step out of comfort zones and embrace the discomfort that comes with understanding." The young man smiled, a sense of peace washing over him. "This is the legacy we leave behind, not just for ourselves, but for those who come after us." His words hung in the air, a promise of hope and possibility. The crowd murmured in agreement, each person reflecting on how far they had come in such a short time. Differences that once seemed insurmountable now felt manageable, a bridge slowly forming between beliefs and experiences. The manager nodded again, a hint of pride in his eyes. "Let's build that bridge. Together." Elon stepped back, watching as the mall began to return to normal, but with a renewed sense of understanding. The MAGA hat no longer stood as a symbol of division. It stood as a reminder of unity forged through dialogue and empathy. In that moment, the crowd realized they weren't just witnessing change, they were becoming part of it. The mall was quieter now, but the atmosphere was electric with possibility. The conversation had shifted from confrontation to collaboration. The manager glanced at Elon, then at the young man. "This isn't just a moment, it's a movement," he said quietly, his voice steady with newfound resolve. Elon nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. "Exactly. Change starts with action, but it doesn't end here. It continues beyond this space, shaping communities, conversations, and the way we treat each other." The young man's eyes sparkled with hope. "And it begins with us," he said firmly. "Every interaction, every decision we make moving forward, will reflect the lessons we've learned here today." The crowd began to disperse, but the impact lingered. People walked away with a deeper understanding, a sense of shared responsibility. Differences didn't disappear, but they no longer defined the space. Instead, empathy bridged the gap. As they left the mall, something shifted in the air. It wasn't just a physical change, it was a shift in perspective. The world didn't need to divide itself into opposing sides. It could come together through conversation, understanding, and respect. The journey may continue, but the foundation had been set. And with every step forward, that foundation would grow stronger. Ready to create positive change in your own space? Start a conversation that matters. Together, we can build a future where understanding leads the way.